A wealthy 23-year-old stood in the middle of Judge Judy's courtroom, his Rolex catching the fluorescent lights as he pointed his finger directly at America's most famous television judge. "My father owns you," he snarled, his voice dripping with the kind of arrogance that money breeds and privilege protects. The courtroom went silent. Not the comfortable silence of respect, but the suffocating quiet of collective shock. In that moment, Brandon Westfield, heir to a $200 million real estate empire, made the biggest mistake of his entitled life. He just declared war on a woman who'd been breaking spoiled rich kids like him for 4 decades. What he didn't know, what his money and his father's connections couldn't tell him, was that Judge Judy Scheindlin wasn't just some TV personality playing dress-up in a black robe. She was a former family court judge from Brooklyn who'd seen every con, every lie, and every entitled brat the system could produce. And she'd never, not once, backed down. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The smirk on Brandon's face that day told everyone watching that he believed he was untouchable. His custom-tailored suit probably cost more than most people make in a month. His Italian leather shoes squeaked against the courtroom floor as he shifted his weight, waiting for Judge Judy to fold, to apologize, to recognize his superiority. But something flickered in her eyes. Not fear. Not intimidation. Something colder. Something that should have warned him to sit down and shut his mouth. Instead he doubled down. And 30 minutes later, that same young man who thought his last name was a shield against consequence found himself in handcuffs, his wrists bound behind his back, his face flushed with humiliation as courthouse deputies escorted him through the same doors he'd strutted through an hour earlier. But here's what makes this story extraordinary. Here's the part that nobody talks about. Judge Judy was the underdog that day. Yes, you heard that right. The famous television judge, the woman whose face appears on billboards and whose voice has become synonymous with no-nonsense justice, walked into that courtroom knowing Brandon's father had connections to the network executives who could end her show with a phone call. She knew the risk. She knew that one wrong move, one moment of going too far, could give the Westfield family ammunition to destroy everything she'd built. The cameras were rolling. Millions would eventually watch. And she had to make a choice between her career and her conscience. Before we see how this Brooklyn-born warrior faced down wealth and power and emerged victorious, if you believe in real justice and accountability, and in standing up for what's right no matter who's watching, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel exists to bring you stories about people who refuse to bow to entitlement, who fight for working people against the powerful, and who prove that in America respect still matters more than money. Smash that like button if you're ready to see a spoiled rich brat learn the hardest lesson of his life. Now let's go back to where this all started. The courtroom of Judge Judy Scheindlin doesn't look like the grand marble halls of the Supreme Court or the imposing chambers where corporate lawyers battle over millions. It's smaller, more intimate, designed specifically for television but no less real in its authority. The walls are a neutral beige, the kind that doesn't distract from the human drama unfolding in the center. Rows of burgundy seats fill the gallery where audience members sit, some leaning forward with anticipation, others with arms crossed, ready to witness justice or theater or hopefully both. The bench where Judge Judy presides sits elevated, a position of power that's both literal and symbolic. Behind her, the seal of her court, a reminder that despite the cameras and the commercial breaks, this is a real arbitration with real legal consequences. The air conditioning hums quietly, but it does nothing to cool the tension that always seems to simmer in this space, waiting for the right spark to explode into conflict. Judge Judy Scheindlin was 79 years old that day, but you wouldn't know it from the fire in her eyes or the sharpness in her voice. Born Judith Susan Blum in Brooklyn, New York in 1942, she grew up in a world where respect wasn't optional and excuses weren't currency. Her father was a dentist, her mother didn't tolerate nonsense, and the neighborhood taught her that your word was your bond and your reputation was everything. She put herself through law school, became a prosecutor in New York's family court system, and spent years dealing with deadbeat parents, neglectful guardians, and people who thought they could lie their way out of responsibility. By the time she launched her television show in 1996, she'd heard every excuse, seen every scam, and developed a sixth sense for spotting bullshit from 50 feet away. Her reputation was built on 3 immovable pillars: tell the truth, take responsibility, and show respect. Violate any one of those and you'd face the full force of her judgment. She didn't raise her voice because she was angry. She raised it because she was right. And after 25 years on television, she'd become more than a judge. She'd become a cultural institution, a grandmother figure who millions trusted to cut through the nonsense and deliver common-sense justice. But that morning, Judge Judy carried a weight that viewers couldn't see. 3 weeks earlier, her producer had pulled her aside with troubling news. The Westfield family, major donors to the network that aired her show, had connections that reached into the highest levels of corporate decision-making. Brandon's father, Richard Westfield, wasn't just wealthy. He was influential. He sat on charity boards with network executives. He played golf with people who controlled programming budgets. And he'd already made phone calls, not threats exactly, but suggestions that perhaps his son's case should be handled delicately. Judge Judy had been in television long enough to know what delicately meant. It meant go easy. It meant remember who pays the bills. It meant compromise your principles or risk your platform. She'd spent a sleepless night weighing her options. At 79, she didn't need this show for the money. But she needed it for something more important: the message. Every episode was a lesson that character mattered more than wealth, that respect wasn't negotiable, that justice didn't care about your last name. If she folded now, if she let one entitled rich kid walk over her because of his father's connections, what did that say to the millions who watched? What did it say to the single mothers and working-class families who saw her as their champion? Across from her bench, standing near the plaintiff's table, was Brandon Westfield, and he looked exactly like what he was: a young man who'd never been told no. At 23, he had the posture of someone who expected the world to rearrange itself for his convenience. His suit was custom-tailored Armani, probably $8,000, in a shade of navy so dark it was almost black. His shirt was crisp white, French cuffs fastened with gold cufflinks that caught the light every time he moved his hands. The Rolex on his wrist was a Daytona rose gold, the kind that costs more than a new car. His hair was styled with product that held every strand in place, and his face wore that particular expression of boredom mixed with contempt that only comes from a lifetime of getting everything you want. He'd grown up in a 12,000-square-foot mansion in Connecticut, attended private schools where his father's donations guaranteed his advancement, and learned early that money was a universal solvent for problems. Speeding tickets disappeared. Academic probation vanished. Consequences were for other people, for the working class, for those without connections. Standing at the defendant's table was Miguel Rodriguez, 47 years old, wearing his best shirt and a tie that was slightly too wide because it was the one he wore to weddings and funerals. His hands were calloused from 30 years of construction work, his face weathered from countless hours under the sun. Miguel owned a small contracting business in Stamford, Connecticut. He employed 4 guys, all family or friends from his neighborhood. He'd built his reputation on honest work and fair prices. When Brandon Westfield hired him to customize his Porsche's garage, Miguel thought it was a straightforward job. Install climate control, upgrade the flooring, add custom lighting. They agreed on $15,000. Miguel did the work perfectly, even adding extra touches without charging more. But when he asked for payment, Brandon found fault with everything. The temperature control was too loud. The floor wasn't quite the right shade. The lights were positioned wrong. It was all lies, but Brandon knew Miguel couldn't afford a real lawyer to fight him. So Miguel came to Judge Judy's court as his last hope, carrying a folder full of photographs, receipts, and text messages that proved he'd done everything right. He just needed someone to listen. Someone who wouldn't be impressed by Brandon's last name or intimidated by his father's money. The stage was set for a collision between two Americas. Judge Judy entered the courtroom with her usual brisk efficiency, her robe flowing behind her as she climbed the 3 steps to her bench. The bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Judith Scheindlin." Everyone stood. Well, almost everyone. Brandon Westfield rose slowly, making a show of his reluctance, his eyes already rolling before a single word had been spoken. Judge Judy noticed. She noticed everything. She settled into her chair, arranged her papers, and looked up at the 2 men standing before her. On her left, Miguel Rodriguez stood straight, his hands clasped in front of him, his expression hopeful but nervous. On her right, Brandon leaned against the plaintiff's table like he was waiting for a taxi, his phone in his hand until the bailiff gave him a sharp look and he pocketed it with an exaggerated sigh. "This is case number 4127, Westfield versus Rodriguez." Judge Judy began, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Mr. Westfield, you're the plaintiff. You claim the defendant owes you $15,000 for substandard work on your property. Is that correct?" Brandon straightened up, but only slightly, and when he spoke, his voice carried the bored tone of someone reading a grocery list. "Yes, Your Honor. I hired Mr. Rodriguez to renovate my garage for my Porsche 911 Turbo S, and he completely botched the job. The climate control system he installed is loud enough to wake the neighbors. The epoxy flooring he laid down is the wrong shade of gray. The LED lighting makes everything look cheap. It's unacceptable, and I want my money back plus damages for the time I've wasted dealing with this. He said it like he was describing a minor inconvenience at a five-star hotel, like Miguel was a waiter who'd brought the wrong wine. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained level. You want your money back. Did you pay him anything? Brandon waved his hand dismissively. No, because the work wasn't completed to my standards. Judge Judy leaned forward. So you're suing him for $15,000 that you never paid him in the first place? Brandon's face showed confusion, like the question itself was stupid. Well, yes, because he wasted my time and now I have to hire someone else to fix his mistakes. Time is money, Your Honor. The way he said Your Honor made it sound like he was humoring a child. Judge Judy's jaw tightened, but she moved on. Do you have any documentation? Photos of this allegedly substandard work? Written complaints you sent to Mr. Rodriguez giving him a chance to fix the problems? Brandon shrugged. I have photos on my phone somewhere, but honestly, it's obvious just by looking at it. Anyone with taste can see he did a terrible job. Judge Judy set her pen down carefully, a gesture Miguel would later recognize as a warning sign. Mr. Westfield, in my courtroom, we deal in evidence, not opinions about taste. Do you have the photos or don't you? Brandon's face flushed slightly, the first crack in his composure. I told you they're on my phone. I can find them if you give me a minute. He reached for his pocket, but Judge Judy's voice stopped him. No. You should have come prepared. This isn't a casual conversation. This is a courtroom. Brandon's jaw clenched. With all due respect, Your Honor, I have a busy schedule. I don't have time to organize photos for... Judge Judy cut him off, her voice rising. Don't speak when I'm speaking. The courtroom went quiet. Brandon's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at her like she just suggested he fly to the moon. Judge Judy turned to Miguel. Mr. Rodriguez, tell me your side. Miguel cleared his throat, his accent slight but noticeable, his words careful. Your Honor, I did exactly what Mr. Westfield asked. He wanted climate control in his garage, I installed a top-of-the-line system. He wanted epoxy flooring, I used the exact shade he picked from the sample. He wanted LED lighting, I put in commercial-grade fixtures. I have all the receipts. I have photos from every stage of the work. I have text messages where he approved everything. He opened his folder, his hands shaking slightly, and pulled out a stack of printed photos. Here, Your Honor. You can see the quality. I even added extra insulation around the climate control to make it quieter, no extra charge. I treated his garage like it was my own home. Judge Judy took the photos, examining each one carefully. Her expression softened. The work was meticulous, professional, beautiful even. She looked back at Brandon. Mr. Westfield, this looks like excellent work to me. What exactly is your complaint? Brandon scoffed, the sound echoing in the quiet courtroom. Your Honor, no offense, but you're not exactly a car enthusiast. That garage is for a $200,000 vehicle. The standards are higher than... He stopped mid-sentence because Judge Judy had stood up. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. The movement itself was enough. Excuse me? Her voice was ice. Did you just tell me I'm not qualified to judge the quality of work because I'm not a car enthusiast? Brandon realized he'd stepped in something, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. I'm just saying there are standards you might not be familiar with. The gallery behind him murmured, a low rumble of disapproval. Judge Judy sat back down slowly, deliberately. Mr. Westfield, let me tell you what I'm familiar with. I'm familiar with people who try to cheat hard-working contractors out of money they've earned. I'm familiar with entitled individuals who think their wealth gives them the right to disrespect others. And I'm familiar with young men who've never been held accountable for anything in their lives. Now sit down and show me some respect, or this is going to be a very short case. Brandon's face went red, but he sat. For about 30 seconds there was blessed silence. Then Miguel spoke again, his voice stronger now. Your Honor, he never complained about any of this until I asked for payment. The day I finished, he walked through the garage with me. He said it was perfect. He said his father would be impressed. Then when I sent him the invoice, he stopped answering my calls. I'm a small business owner. I have a family. That $15,000 is 2 months of income for me. He's trying to steal from me because he thinks I can't fight back. His voice cracked slightly on the last sentence, genuine emotion breaking through. Judge Judy looked at Brandon, and her expression made clear she'd already reached a conclusion. Mr. Westfield, Did you tell Mr. Rodriguez the work was satisfactory when he completed it? Brandon shifted in his seat. I might have said something polite, but I didn't mean. Judge Judy held up her hand. You didn't mean it? Of course. Because in your world, words don't matter. Commitments don't matter. Other people's livelihoods don't matter. The only thing that matters is what you want in any given moment. Brandon's face went from red to purple. His hands gripped the table edge. And then he made his second massive mistake of the day. He stood up without being called on, his voice rising. This is ridiculous. You're clearly biased against me. Judge Judy's eyebrows shot up. Sit down, Mr. Westfield. But he didn't sit down. He took a step forward. No. I don't have to take this. Do you know who my father is? The courtroom held its breath. Judge Judy stood again, her full authority radiating from the bench. I don't care if your father is the President of the United States. In this courtroom you follow my rules. And that's when Brandon Westfield crossed the line from which there was no return. Brandon Westfield's finger shot up, pointing directly at Judge Judy like a weapon. His face twisted with rage that had been simmering beneath his polished exterior for the past 20 minutes. You can't talk to me like that, he shouted, his voice cracking with indignation. The courtroom froze. Even the cameramen stopped adjusting their equipment. Miguel Rodriguez took an involuntary step back, his eyes wide. The audience members sat paralyzed, caught between shock and anticipation. This was the moment everyone sensed was coming but nobody truly believed would arrive. Judge Judy's face went absolutely still, her eyes locked on Brandon with the focused intensity of a predator watching prey make a fatal error. Excuse me? Her voice was quiet, dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes thunder. What did you just say? Brandon was too far gone to recognize the warning. His privilege had insulated him from consequences for so long that he'd forgotten consequences existed. You heard me. You're sitting up there acting like you're some kind of authority, but you're not. You're just a television personality. My father has donated millions to this network. Millions. He plays golf with your bosses. He has their personal cell phone numbers. One phone call and you're finished. The gallery gasped, a collective intake of breath that sounded like wind rushing through a tunnel. Judge Judy remained perfectly still, but something changed in her expression. The frustration that had been building gave way to something colder, something that made even the bailiff straighten up and move slightly closer. Mr. Westfield, she said, her voice carrying across the courtroom with crystalline clarity, I'm going to give you one opportunity to apologize and sit down. One opportunity. Take it. But Brandon was riding the wave of his own rage now, his sense of invincibility overriding whatever minimal judgment he'd possessed walking in. Apologize? For what? For telling the truth. He laughed, actually laughed, a sharp barking sound that echoed off the walls. My father owns you. He owns this network. He owns this courtroom. You work for people like him. You're nothing. You're a public servant playing dress up in a robe, and if you think you can humiliate me on television and get away with it, you're delusional. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Miguel Rodriguez's mouth had fallen open. The audience sat in stunned silence, some with hands over their mouths, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of Brandon Westfield's self-destruction. Judge Judy stood to her full height, and though she was not a tall woman, in that moment she seemed to tower over the entire courtroom. Her voice, when it came, was steel wrapped in ice. Bailiff. The court officer moved immediately toward Brandon. Judge Judy's eyes never left the young man's face. Mr. Westfield, you are in contempt of this court. You have shown flagrant disrespect for the judicial process, you have threatened a sitting judge, and you have demonstrated that you believe yourself to be above the law. Brandon's face was still flushed with anger, but something flickered in his eyes now. Uncertainty. The first creeping awareness that perhaps he'd made a mistake. You can't do this, he said, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. My father. Judge Judy cut him off, her words falling like a gavel. Your father is not here. Your father's money is not here. Your father's connections are not here. What is here is you, standing in my courtroom, having just confessed on camera that you believe wealth entitles you to own people. The bailiff will now escort you into custody for contempt. And Mr. Westfield? She paused, letting him look at her one more time. Your father can't buy you out of this. Brandon's mouth opened, but no words came out. The bailiff's hand was already on his arm. If you're sitting there watching this entitled brat finally face real consequences, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you would have said to this spoiled rich kid. And make sure you're subscribed because this channel brings you stories about justice, accountability, and people who refuse to bow down to wealth and power. We've got more coming and you don't want to miss a single one. Now let's watch what happens when privilege meets reality and reality wins. The bailiff's hand closed around Brandon's arm, firm but not aggressive, the grip of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Brandon jerked his arm back instinctively, his face contorting with disbelief. "Get your hands off me," he hissed, his voice lower now but no less hostile. "I said don't touch me. I'm leaving." He tried to turn toward the exit, but the bailiff moved with him, blocking his path. "Sir, you need to come with me." Brandon's eyes darted around the courtroom, looking for an escape route, looking for someone to intervene, looking for anything that would make this nightmare stop. But there was nothing. Miguel Rodriguez stood frozen at the defendant's table, his folder still clutched in his hands. The audience watched in absolute silence, some leaning forward in their seats, nobody wanting to miss what happened next. "This is insane," Brandon said, his voice rising again. "You can't arrest me. I haven't done anything wrong. I was just defending myself against her bias." He pointed back at Judge Judy, who remained standing at her bench, her expression unreadable. The bailiff's voice was patient but firm. "Sir, you've been found in contempt of court. You need to comply." Brandon's breath was coming faster now, his chest heaving, and for the first time since this ordeal began, fear crept into his features. Real fear. Not the manipulative fear of someone trying to gain sympathy, but the genuine terror of a person realizing they've lost control. "Wait," he said, and his voice cracked. "Wait, okay. I'll apologize. I'll sit down. I didn't mean what I said." He looked up at Judge Judy, and now his eyes were pleading. "Your Honor, I was upset. I spoke out of turn. I'm sorry. Can we just continue with the case?" Judge Judy's expression didn't change. When she spoke, her voice carried no anger anymore, just absolute certainty. "Mr. Westfield, you meant every word you said. You revealed exactly who you are. A young man who believes his father's wealth makes him immune to consequences. A young man who thinks respect is something you can buy or intimidate people into giving you. You didn't just insult me. You insulted every person who's ever stood in a courtroom seeking justice. You insulted the very concept of the rule of law." Brandon opened his mouth to protest, but Judge Judy wasn't finished. "And now you're going to learn something your father's money couldn't teach you. Actions have consequences. Bailiff, proceed." The officer called over his radio for backup, his voice calm and professional. "Need assistance in courtroom A." Within 30 seconds, 2 additional officers entered through the side door. Brandon's eyes went wide. No. This is crazy. I'm cooperating. See, I'm cooperating." But he wasn't cooperating. His body was rigid, his feet planted, his whole posture radiating resistance. One of the officers pulled handcuffs from his belt, the metallic click echoing through the silent courtroom. "Sir, put your hands behind your back." Brandon's face had gone pale now, the anger drained away, replaced by something that looked like shock. "You're actually going to handcuff me? Do you have any idea who I am?" The officer's response was simple and devastating. "Right now, sir, you're someone under arrest." The click of the handcuffs closing around Brandon Westfield's wrists was the loudest sound in the courtroom. Metal against metal, final and unforgiving, the sound of privilege meeting its limits. Brandon's whole body went rigid, his shoulders hunching forward as the reality of his situation crashed over him like a wave. His expensive suit suddenly looked ridiculous, costume jewelry on a man being led away in chains. His face had transformed completely from the arrogant sneer he'd worn walking into something raw and exposed. His eyes were wide, darting from the bailiff to Judge Judy to the audience, searching desperately for someone who would make this stop. But nobody moved. Nobody intervened. This was justice, pure and simple, and everyone in that room knew they were witnessing something rare and precious. "This isn't happening," Brandon muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "This can't be happening." But it was happening. The bailiff guided him toward the side exit, the one that led to holding cells rather than the hallway where free people walked. Brandon's legs moved mechanically, like his brain hadn't quite caught up to what his body was doing. As he passed Miguel Rodriguez, their eyes met for a brief second. Miguel's expression held no triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet sadness for a young man who'd thrown away his dignity over $15,000 he'd never intended to pay in the first place. Brandon looked away first, unable to hold the gaze of the man he'd tried to cheat. Just before the door closed behind him, Brandon turned back one last time, his voice desperate and pleading. "Your Honor, please. I'll pay him. I'll pay Mr. Rodriguez right now. I'll apologize. Just don't do this. Judge Judy had sat back down, her hands folded on the bench before her, and when she spoke, her voice carried no anger, no vindication, just weary certainty. Mr. Westfield, 40 years ago when I started as a prosecutor in family court, I saw young men like you every single day. Different names, different backgrounds, but the same fundamental problem. You've never been held accountable. Someone, probably your father, has always swept in to fix your mistakes, to pay off your problems, to make consequences disappear. And in doing that, they didn't help you. They crippled you. She paused, and the courtroom was so quiet you could hear the ventilation system humming. What you did today wasn't just contempt of court. It was a symptom of something much deeper. You genuinely believe that money makes you superior to other people. That wealth is a credential that excuses you from basic human decency. And maybe your father's money can buy you out of a lot of things. But it can't buy you out of this. Because if I let you walk out of here without consequences, I'm not just failing you. I'm failing every person who's watching this and wondering if justice still means anything in America. Brandon's eyes were wet now, whether from rage or humiliation or fear nobody could say, but tears clung to his eyelashes as he stood there in handcuffs. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm really sorry. Judge Judy nodded slowly. I believe you're sorry. I believe you're experiencing genuine remorse right now. But you're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry for what's happening to you. There's a difference, Mr. Westfield. And maybe a night in county jail will teach you to understand that difference. Bailiff, take him. The door closed with a heavy thud that echoed through the courtroom like a period at the end of a sentence. For several seconds nobody moved. Then Judge Judy turned her attention back to Miguel Rodriguez, who still stood at the defendant's table looking stunned, like he couldn't quite believe what he'd just witnessed. Mr. Rodriguez, Judge Judy said, her voice softening considerably, I find in your favor. The evidence clearly shows you completed the work as agreed, to professional standards, and that Mr. Westfield's complaints are without merit. He owes you $15,000 for the contracted work. Miguel's shoulders sagged with relief, but Judge Judy wasn't finished. Furthermore, I'm awarding you an additional $5,000 for court costs, your time, and the emotional distress of being dragged into this courtroom by someone who never intended to pay you in the first place. Total judgment, $20,000. The gallery erupted in applause, the sound washing over Miguel like absolution. His hands were shaking as he clutched his folder, and when he looked up at Judge Judy, his eyes were shining. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. Judge Judy's expression softened into something almost maternal. Don't thank me, Mr. Rodriguez. You did good work. You came prepared. You told the truth. That's all anyone can ask. Now go file that judgment and get your money. She banged her gavel once, a sharp crack that signaled the end. Court is adjourned. Brandon Westfield spent 24 hours in county jail before his father posted bail. That might not sound like much, but for someone who'd never experienced a consequence in his life, it was an eternity. No designer suits. No expensive watches. No privilege. Just a concrete cell and the reality that money couldn't erase what he'd done. The video of his courtroom meltdown went viral within hours, racking up millions of views across social media platforms. His name became a punchline, a cautionary tale, a symbol of everything wrong with entitled wealth. His father, humiliated by his son's behavior, issued a public apology and made him work from the bottom up in the family company, no trust fund access, no executive privileges. The civil judgment stood. Miguel Rodriguez got every penny of his $20,000, and his business saw a surge of new clients who'd seen him stand up to a bully and win. But here's the real lesson, the one that matters to you watching this right now. Judge Judy was 79 years old that day. She could have taken the easy path. She could have remembered those network connections, those donations, those phone calls from powerful people suggesting she tread carefully. She could have protected her show, her career, her comfort. Instead, she chose principle over convenience. She chose to be the underdog fighting for what was right rather than the powerful figure bowing to wealth. And in that choice, she reminded millions of Americans that respect isn't bought, it's earned. That justice isn't reserved for those who can afford it, but guaranteed to those who deserve it. That standing up to power, even when it's risky, even when it's hard, is what defines character. You don't need a television show or a courtroom to make that same choice. Every time you refuse to tolerate entitlement, every time you stand up for someone being treated unfairly, every time you teach a young person that wealth without character is worthless, you're fighting the same fight Judge Judy fought that day. Your generation built this country on values that matter: hard work, respect, accountability. Don't let those values die because some people think money makes them special. If this story reminded you why character matters more than cash, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story about justice being served. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that in America, nobody owns you. And drop a comment telling me about a time you witnessed instant karma. Thanks for watching, and remember, respect is earned, not bought. Stay strong out there.